All right, welcome to MalFramework tutorial number 3. Today, or right now, we're going to cover setting up the Description.hpp. Under MalFramework in the wiki, he talks about the naming convention like we talked about in video 2, and he starts talking about customizing the framework. One of the things you want to customize is the Description.hpp. It's helpful if you go find your Steam UID, have mine handy, and we will go into the mission that we're making, Bright Light, mission framework, the config, and the description.hpp. So we'll just replace Malbran's Steam ID with mine. You don't have to do this part, but why not? And I'll put my name in there. I like using VCOM for the scripted missions, and it works with lambs. So I leave it turned on. But if you wanted to turn it off, you would just put these 2 slashes here. I want it on anyway. My game mode is going to be co-op. You can see he says co-op or TDM for TVT. And I don't quite know how many players I'm going to have yet, but obviously minimum players is 1, and we'll just leave it at 12 for right now. We can always come back and change it. This is the briefing name that you would see like on the mission load screen and such. So we'll just leave it at co-op 12, and we called this Bright Light. Right here he describes how he uses his naming convention. In the overview text, so mission for the mission info and the mission selection screen. Malvern has a certain way of listing it, like mission assets, the factions, time limits, respawns, gyps. I'll go and change that later, but you would just change it inside these brackets. In fact, on a different mission that I made with his framework, you can see that the overview text was this right here. Talk basically about the overall mission, assets, respawns, and gyp enabled. The next is the loading screen settings on load name, just the name of the mission, Bright Light. I'm going to end up changing the name, but right now we're just going to leave it Bright Light. He talks about what he drops here on mission load. Mission description, basically, the first part maybe of what this says. So you would include this part here, just right here. And the name of the mission maker, you can go ahead and just list yourself, because the framework gives credit to Malbran, like in the map screen on that menu in the upper left corner. And then load screen, he has a default image, and it basically tells you where to find it. Mission framework, config, image, loading screen. So in here it's the mission framework, config, image, and it was loading screen. This one is for the other mission I'm using, not for the Malbran's framework or the mission that we're doing now. Let's go back into image. So that's his default image that we saw earlier in video 2 when we started ARMA with just LCID as the one playable unit. So you can change this, and you can change the name of it. You could leave it as loading screen, or you can change it to whatever name you want. But that's where you would probably leave this the same, because ARMA's going to look for it in that image folder, but you might change the name here. And then you would click, save whatever changes you have, and that's changing the Description.hpp. Going back to what I said earlier about the debug, if you remember the debug codes or debug script or writing was coming up in the lower left hand corner, that can be found in this Config.sqf. It's the very first parameter, debug mode. It's turned on by default for true because you're making your mission, so you want the debug to be on so you can see if it reports some errors. But once your mission's made and you're done with it, turn it off before deploying the mission. So you would change this to false and obviously save the mission or the config.sqf. Mission type, is it TVT? It's not a TVT because I'm making a co-op, so we'll leave it at false. And that's all we're going to cover right now for that part. What you can also do to lay down units, if you remember in the last video, we just laid down LSID. But I have compositions, and in the compositions, I have like Recon Team Columbia. So I just pull that over, lay down Recon Team Columbia, I get rid of LSID, and whatever unit you place first is going to be the first one in the mission slot selection screen or unit selection screen, because he is the like the team leader and everybody is grouped to him by these blue lines. Then he is always going to be first. Whichever unit I laid down second, which in this case would be the medic, and then I believe it was this Montagnard squad leader, and then I think it was, I can't remember what order it was, but basically when I built the composition, it will keep it in order of how I laid the unit personnel down. So you can see here, RT Columbia, the 1-0 is the American TL, the 1-1 is the American medic, the 0-1 is the Montagnard TL, the 0-2 is the Grenadier, 0-3 is the Montagnard light machine gunner, and the 0-4 is the Montagnard scout. So when I built the composition, that's how I laid the units down, which is why they show up in that order. If I would have put down this Montagnard Grenadier first, then it would show up first unless I synced everything to this guy, where he would show up first, and then it would show the Montagnard Grenadier. If you don't get what I'm saying, just play around with it. But basically, whatever unit you lay down first, that's the one that'll be at the top. Now these units, we don't have the gear script made yet, so they would just come out with this default gear, not the SOG gear. But as you can see, this is since all these guys are in a team, and then all of these guys are grouped to this one team leader, you can click into the like the unit symbol, and that's where I have set the TFAR radios. So with this script, if you go back and look at this code right here, remember, the two numbers called MalFramework or MalFramework TFAR function set radios. This two numbers call MalFramework TFAR function set radios. It's saying that the first one is the short range channel, so number 6. The second one is the long range channel, number 3. So with the so the reason I'm putting that function in the unit symbol is because then it applies it to all of the team members. So their short range is on 2, their long range, if they have it, is on 1. And it basically calls the TFAR module. In Malvern's framework, in the core, he refers to these as modules. So if we're going to use TFAR, you can come in here, click on the README, and it tells you a lot more about how to set up the TFAR module. And these pre-configured channels, I believe they're either configured in his TFAR module or the CBA settings, because you can set the channels and radios in CBA settings. And what he's built these off of is FK's radio frequencies that we commonly use. So going back to my team that I've laid down, Recon Team Columbia, this is where I've called the TFAR module and what channels the radios start out on. In each individual unit, remember this is where I have this guy he gets the TL gear. His his special ability or unit trait is platoon level leadership, which is the 2, so that way he can call respawns, resupply, and a tactical withdrawal. That's why, you know, he's the TL, so he's the one in charge. That's why he's a 2. He doesn't have any special or ace player variables, so he's false, false, false. Remember, if this first one was true, then he would have medic status. The second one was pilot, and the third one was engineer. If we were using BFT, their unit marker would be red. That's the default, not default, but that's the view distance that they start with, and where these brackets in between here would be a unit patch if I wanted them to have a unit patch. The set unit array is to give him the SOG, Prairie Fire, like the radio support module, so he can call in airstrikes and artillery. That's what this line's for. We'll talk about that later. And then this line is for like a custom channel. So like in FK's template, if you walk up to the statue and use the statue function to join the JTAC channel, that's basically what this function is calling, and we'll explain that later. So remember, the unit is playable. Remember the naming convention, and then what, you know, Recon Team Columbia, and then the position under it. Start them out in the default stance, which is basically standing, and I don't really change any of this other stuff because I'm using Malvern's framework. So if we look at the second in charge, which is the medic, you can see we call the medic gear script. He has a 1, which gives him the squad level leadership ability, which would be he can deploy rally points. And he's a medic, so he's true, false, false, again red, because he's in that team, so that he would fall under that red BFT if we used BFT in SOG. View distance is 2500. We don't do a unit patch. And there's his name, and again, you fit him. He's fitting under RT Columbia. And then we come to the Montagnard, and he has the Terp gear script. The reason I name that is for historical reasons. Usually on recon teams, the Americans did not speak enough or any whatever language their recon team was made up of. In this case, we're using Montagnards. So I just gave him the terp gear script. Not that he's actually like an interpreter, but it's just for me keeping it organized. Again, I want him to be able to deploy rally points, and he's false, false, false because he doesn't have any of those ace attributes. Red 2500 and no unit patch. I think it was the Grenadier that was next. He gets no special abilities. He gets the Grenadier gear script, false, 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 red 2500. So you can see the theme here as you're building out, or as I'm building out this recon team. I think, yeah, machine gunner was, I think, next. Gets the machine gunner script, no special abilities. Sorry, gear script, no special abilities, false, 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 red 2500, same. And then finally for the scout. That's the end of video number 3. If you have any questions, just put it in the comments, DM me, or get a hold of Mission Maker that you know. Thanks again.